Today, I'm going to talk about a physical change. In a prior video, I talked about the difference between a chemical versus a physical change. And as you can see on my screen, I have a video that talks about this difference. So I'm going to replay this video as a refresher, but in this video, I'm only going to discuss examples of physical changes. So let's go ahead and hear this video.
Let's talk about a chemical versus a physical change. So what is a chemical change? Electrolysis of water is an example because new substances, that is hydrogen gas and oxygen gas, are formed after running electricity through water. So a change in chemical properties and composition has occurred. And what is a physical change? When you go get a haircut, because hair does not change after cutting, or when water boils to form steam, it changes its state of matter from a liquid to a gas. These are both changes where there has not been a change chemically nor in composition. So, to determine what change is taking place, either chemically or physically, all you need to ask yourself is if there has been a change in composition or if new substances have been formed.
Okay, so that was a video of talking about the difference between a chemical versus a physical change. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a whiteboard to identify those questions you should be asking yourself when you need to find out if something is a physical change. So let's go ahead and do this. So here's a physical change. Now, the questions you should ask yourself are the following. Was there a change in composition? Is one question. All right. So that's one. The second question is, was there a change in chemical properties? And the third question is going to be, were there new substances formed? Now, I like to use electrolysis as a basis, which I did say I'm only discussing physical changes, and that's what I'm going to do. But electrolysis is a chemical change. Now, that's a good example to use as a basis to determine if something is a physical change. So in electrolysis, new substances are formed. And those substances are hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. So if you use electrolysis as a basis to think, okay, is this a physical change? Because in a chemical change, you can see that you have two new substances. So a physical change, there aren't any new substances formed. So now we're going to look at some examples of these physical changes. Okay, so here I am in my kitchen, and I wanted to show you an example of a physical change. As you can see on the stove there, I have some boiling water. So boiling water is an example of a physical change. And why is that? Because there's no change in composition, there's no change in chemical properties, and no new substances have been formed. And as you can see, the only thing that's happening, you can see the steam coming out of there because the water changed from a liquid to a gas. It only changed its state of matter. So this is an example of a physical change. So that boiling water example, it served two purposes. One, to explain the physical change that was happening. And two, I made myself a cup of apple cider tea after boiling that water. But moving right along here, let's go into another type of physical change. And here I have it. I'm burning a candle. Now, a candle is both a physical and a chemical change. But for purposes of this video, I'm only going to talk about the physical changes that are happening. So when you're burning a candle, you have a solid state of matter, which is a candle. Once you start burning it, it's melting, and of course there's liquid forming. And I can't show it here because of the lighting. It's very hard to show the liquid. But in any event, it turns into liquid. That's another state of matter. But guess what? It's burning, so it's emitting a gas. And that gas is another state of matter. So you got a solid state of matter to a liquid state of matter to a gas state of matter. And that's what's interesting about a candle. It goes through all those states of matter just after burning it. Okay, so here's another example of a physical change. Here's a good old potato. Now, what happened to this potato? I peeled it and I cut it. So it transformed physically from this to this. So that's an example of a physical change. And you can go back to those questions and ask yourself, was there a change in composition? Was there a change in chemical properties? Or were new substances formed? And of course not. It just changed physically. And that's a good example of a physical change. Let's talk about other examples of physical changes. Like a haircut, you changed physically. Now your hair looks shorter. What about mowing a lawn? First you had tall grass. After cutting it, now the lawn looks manicured. So it changed physically. What about ice cubes? Well, you put water in a tray and they become ice cubes. So it went from a liquid state of matter to a solid state of matter after freezing. So the water changed physically. Same thing with icicles. You go from a liquid state of matter, which is water, then they become icicles. So there was just a change in the state of matter. So it changed physically. And tearing paper. It's still paper after it's torn. So basically, you have to ask yourself all these questions, was there a change in composition? Was there a change in chemical properties? Or were new substances formed?